Okay, so my name is Austin, and this is my, I believe, fifth video in the series on why I love the novel Infinite Jest that I've been making as I've been reading through the book. So, the section that I just came across was the one in which Hal is explaining to Oren the grief therapy sessions or grief therapy that he had to go through after he was the one to discover his dad's corpse after uh, you know his father had committed suicide, and how he was sort of forced into this grief therapy because everyone believed he would need it, and the way that he went about you know attending and participating in the sessions. Before I get into this much further, something I want to address on a more talking about the novel as a whole level is that something I'm fairly certain I'm going to bring up a lot as I talk through the rest of the book is how ETA and AA are sort of you know I don't want to say opposites of each other, but the differences in the two groups allows them to highlight certain aspects of the other, and this is something, like I said, I'm going to talk about a lot. Even there's little things like how in AA throughout the book there's sort of this cheesy slogan of if a newcomer accuses AA of being brainwashing, then someone who's been around for a while will say, yes, it is brainwashing, but I had reached a point where my brain needed a good washing. And how it's sort of like their brain had been assembled into a certain direction and then it had to be taken back apart. This sort of gets compared to a pitch that Charles CT gives to a potential student of ETA, saying, we disassemble your brain and reassemble it to make you competitive and all these different things. So it's sort of showing you like ETA in many ways being the precursor that sets the stage of a lot of things that makes AA necessary. How the reverse brainwashing that is required in AA starts at something like ETA saying, hey, we're going to disassemble your brain and reassemble it in a way to make you highly competitive, both athletically and academically, and how they sort of played off each other in that. So in this section that I'm talking about, where Hal is describing his experience in the grief therapy sessions, sort of an idea in AA described later in the book that this plays off of, is how something discussed about AA is it's sort of a situation where it doesn't matter what you tell anyone else. It doesn't even matter what you tell yourself. All that matters is what's true. And finding a way to be honest with yourself by the time you end up in AA meetings is something that becomes absolutely necessary if you want to maintain any kind of sobriety, right? The people in these meetings have reached a point where they've lied to themselves as much as they possibly could, and they just can't get away with it anymore. So now they're having to find a way to be completely honest with themselves and be completely honest with other people. So the reason why I bring that up is because sort of this grief therapy session that Hal is discussing with Oren in the section is sort of the opposite of that, where he is still able to get away with being dishonest. it's sort of the way that he goes about these grief therapy sessions is like it's almost like a puzzle to him to find the correct way to be dishonest, to make the grief therapist thinks the things about how that he sort of wants him to, that he has to find the right way to lie in order to produce the image that this person wants. And how there's various layers of he goes to the library and reads about how to solve grief from a patient's perspective, and then eventually goes about, oh no, what is a grief therapist taught to look for, all of these different things. But the point is that in no single moment is he ever being honest with this grief therapist. It doesn't even occur to him as something that he should maybe do. And almost more importantly than that is, as Oren is questioning him about, but you did grieve, right? As he's walking through, like asking about what happened with Hal after he found their father's body. He's asking, you did go through like a genuine grief process, right? And this is a question that Hal, more or less can't answer, which shows that, he doesn't really have an ability to be honest with himself, right? It was like never in the process of the grief therapy did it occur to him that he should try to evaluate his own consciousness or examine it, or see if there's anything in there that is worth noting. And so he's never even honest with himself. And the reason why I think that's relevant is that throughout the course of this book, Hal is sort of going through the process of becoming addicted to marijuana, and then who knows what happens after the end of the book, or at the very least between the year of the Depends Adult Undergarment and the Year of Glad sections. But it's something where he is stepping further and further into the path of addiction. And especially early on in the book, he really is trying to wonder, it's like, why do I like smoking weed in private? Why? Like, he's asking himself a lot of questions, but he really, doesn't know how to find any of the answers because, in many ways, he has never gone through the process of trying to be honest with himself. So I just think, this is a really interesting section of the book, sort of setting up, Hal as a character as sort of a precursor of all of the members of the Ennett house, showing, what a lot of those characters a lot of behaviors that they had to unlearn, and Hal is just like sort of displaying those behaviors early on. And in this case, it's, being completely dishonest both with himself and with others. And I think this is just a really interesting part of the book, like I said, of how walking through this grief therapist. But yeah, that's all.